Could Kim Jong-un be willing to give up his nuclear weapons? Pyongyang seems open to talks. Is this a major breakthrough or a bluff? I'm Imran Gupta, and today's Newsmaker is negotiations with North Korea. Ultimate annihilation, fire and fury. That's what confrontations between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump usually sound like. It's why observers were stunned when Pyongyang signaled its willingness to come to the negotiating table and possibly even end its nuclear program. If that happens, will it be seen as a victory for the American policy of applying pressure through sanctions and military force, or will diffuse tensions between the two Koreas sideline Washington? Either way, the skeptics have a lot of ammunition. North Korea has a long history of pulling back on its promises, and even if talks between the US and North Korea happen, critics say the Trump administration is nowhere near ready. Christine Pirovalakis reports.
I think that their statement and the statements coming out of South Korea and North Korea have been very positive. That would be a great thing for the world. Great thing for the world. So we'll see how it all comes about.
North Korea says it's willing to talk with the U.S. about giving up its nuclear weapons, as long as it doesn't feel threatened. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has arranged to meet with his South Korean counterpart next month. It will be the first summit of its kind in more than a decade, and the first for Kim since he came to power in 2011.
The North has clearly stated that during dialogues, there would be no further strategic provocations, such as nuclear tests or ballistic missile tests.
The announcement was made as a South Korean delegation returned from a two-day trip to Pyongyang. But across the Pacific, many are skeptical that North Korea would be willing to bargain away its prized program. Pyongyang has long said its nuclear and ballistic weapons are not up for negotiation. It's also concerned about joint U.S.-South Korea military exercises, which it sees as preparations for war.
North Korea has to agree to not possess nuclear capability. And until that happens, we cannot have an agreement with them. And that is our position, and so we'll see what happens here. Maybe this is a breakthrough. I seriously doubt it, but like I said, hope springs eternal.
Until now, North Korea has always sought to negotiate whenever they were facing hard times. We really shouldn't fall for it again, especially this time.
South Koreans are not the only ones skeptical about Kim Jong-un's intentions. It was just a few months ago that he threatened to target Seoul in the U.S. and even fired an intercontinental ballistic missile close to Japan. It was that aggression that led to more sanctions.
For meaningful dialogue to happen, North Korea must pursue complete, verifiable and irreversible ways to give up its nuclear and missile tests and take actual steps towards denuclearization.
North Korea has a history of breaking its agreements, and previous talks to end its nuclear weapons program, let alone eliminate the weapons it currently possesses, have come to nothing. For months, the U.S. and North Korea have been locked in a fierce war of words.
Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime.
If the U.S. fails to come to its senses and continues to resort to military adventure and tough sanctions, North Korea will respond with its resolute act of justice, as already declared.
But now Kim appears to have taken a more conciliatory tone. He recently accepted an invitation for the two Koreas to march together in the Winter Olympics. As the first North and South Korea summit in a decade nears, many are wondering whether this is an incredible breakthrough or a political ploy by Pyongyang. Christine Pirovalakis, the Newsmakers.
Let's go to our panel now. In Washington, D.C., we have Han Park, who is the founding director of the Center for the Study of Global Issues. Also, Olivia Enos, policy analyst for the Heritage Foundation's Asian Studies Center, and Sung-Yoon Lee, a Korean studies professor at Tufts University. I thank you all for joining us on the Newsmakers. I thank two of you for returning, and Olivia, it's your first time. Thank you very much for joining us. Let me begin with you. Kim Jong-un wants direct talks with the US. Should the United States afford him the courtesy?
I think many people are hailing this as a historic breakthrough moment in North Korea policy. I think the reality is that North Korea has come to the negotiating table before and has never been a faithful actor. I think that this is the absolute wrong moment to begin engaging in dialogue with North Korea, and the U.S. should proceed with caution. This is very much so a wait-and-see moment for North Korea.
Okay, so Han Park, I know you will disagree with this. This is the wrong moment, and the U.S. shouldn't be grabbing this opportunity. Tell me why you disagree.
Yeah, this is a major breakthrough. We have one big change variable, and that is the emergence of more progressive, more peace-oriented government, Moon Jae-in, in South Korea. We have never had such a government since Roh Moo-hyun and Kim Dae-jung. All the conservative government followed the same line of conservatism here in the United States. What is the alternative? Maintain the present status quo will be established if, in fact, President Trump decided to tell North Korean envoy, today they may be meeting, then telling them that unless North Korea has complete, irreversible, and denuclearization, we're not going to talk to them. Then everything will go back to the old reality where we sell weapons to South Korea in the military drills, North and South Korea security alliance and all that. But watch for Moon Jae-in. Moon Jae-in is a much more nationalistic person. Mm-hmm. And North Korea, as a result of Pyeongchang Olympic Games, has become globally much more likable people, a likable country. So they are normal people by and large. They have a security problem. They have, because of environment, domestic and environment, that they have what I call siege mentality.
Right.
They don't behave normally.
Okay.
So, but we either go back or do something about. My suggestion is let's do something about it now.
Okay, so let's ask Sung-Yoon Lee. In the past, when I've spoken to you, the last time I spoke to you, it was during Pyeongchang. You said, well, the symbolism's great, but we need to be a bit skeptical and maybe cautiously optimistic. Now we have this gesture from the North Koreans. Is this a major shift or is it a bluff?
It's a shift toward propaganda wielding the carrot after a year-long bluster provocations wielding the stick. How to explain this sudden outreach? Kim Jong-un woke up on New Year's Day and had a moment of epiphany and decided to be a nice man? I don't think so. Kim Jong-un was so moved by the South Korean president's outreach that now he's changed his ways? Probably not. Maybe the sanctions enforcement by the Trump administration over the past year is a factor, but the most likely scenario is all this was predetermined, preordained. After that banner ballistic year, why not shift gears, take a small step back and smile and get the United States and South Korea to prematurely relax sanctions, win a free pass for the next provocation, and send the royal sister Kim Yo-jong, the first sister, to Washington, bearing a message of peace and a lengthy bill of concessions. Why not change the atmospherics? North Korea is very crafty, and that's what they're doing now.
Well, what do you have to lose, Professor Lee? I mean, they've already made the apocalyptic threats. They already have a totalitarian dictatorship. So why not talk to them to hope that maybe some of this could be reversed, even if incrementally, maybe this time they're sincere? What do you have to lose?
Well, action for action would be nice. Over the past quarter century, the United States and its allies have given North Korea billions of dollars, at times nearly $1 billion a year between 2003 and 2008, all for what? for the optics of inter-Korean rapprochement, for North Korea's repeated lies of denuclearization. So, Leah, let's start with the small things. Why not get Kim Jong-un to allow for exchange of letters between separated families across the DMZ? Why not allow them to be able to call each other? Why not call on Kim Jong-un to allow for market activity, normal trade relations with other countries before North Korea becomes a full-fledged democracy? We don't see any real indicators of change other than Kim Jong-un smiling for the cameras and hosting a banquet.
Han Park, Sung-Yun Lee makes a convincing argument, doesn't he?
No. We have demonized North Korea enough. And demonization made North Korea much more aggressive and work on their nuclear preparedness much more fast. Now, continued demonization like this, being negative about this, what do we gain? Nothing. Maybe we sell more weapons to South Korea. Maybe we bring more weapons there in security alliance with South Korea and Japan to deter China. That's a separate matter. North Korea cannot be dealt with like this, being demonized. We have South Korea different because of the Olympic Games. The climate has changed. We think we should siege this momentum and work for peace. Give North Korea something that they want. That is security. They want security. They don't want to fight with us, the United States.
Okay,
people say.
Okay, interesting point. Let me take that, and my apologies for interrupting you. So let me take that and pose it to Olivia. Ultimately, Olivia, they want to survive. They want to be taken seriously, and they want to be survived. No more, no less. And if they're reaching out, why not take it? Give it a go.
Well, I think we know what North Korea, or at least what South Korea tells us that North Korea has promised about these negotiations. It's promised, for example, potentially to denuclearize in exchange for security guarantees. It's promised potentially to suspend its nuclear and missile testing in the midst of dialogue. It's even said maybe they could set up a hotline between North and South. But what North Korea hasn't promised is three other things. It hasn't promised to be a faithful actor, number one. It hasn't promised that it would keep its word, number two. And number three, to the point of dehumanization, North Korea hasn't promised to make any improvements to its human rights track record. The first 2 points of this, the fact that they haven't promised to be a faithful actor, nullifies any of the potential promises that South Korea says North Korea has made. And if we look to the past negotiations, whether it was the agreed framework or the six-party talks, North Korea agreed to a number of different things. And within days, in some cases, after deals were inked, North Korea was back to business as usual, testing missiles, continuing its nuclear program development.
Right.
When is the international community going to recognize that North Korea is an unfaithful actor and not a faithful negotiating partner?
Let me ask you, Olivia, from their perspective, they consider South Korea and the US to be unfaithful actors when the two countries conduct those mega military drills on their doorstep, right? So it's about interpretation, isn't it?
Well, those military drills are in place to prepare for potential instability, not only on the Korean Peninsula, but also in the Asia Pacific in general. Every country, of course, is going to act in its own national interests, and it's in the interests of the US and South Korea to ensure that our militaries are prepared to deal with any sort of contingencies. So I don't think you can equate the two various issues to each other. I think that on the one hand, the military exercises are there in order to promote security and to promote stability within the Asia Pacific. It's a broader extension of a foreign policy. North Korea does not have a similar foreign policy.
Okay.
And I think that it's very difficult to equate the two.
I want you all to listen to Christopher Hill. And I remember when I just started out covering this story, probably more than a decade ago, about 12 years ago, Christopher Hill was going back and forth and trying to create some diplomacy between the North Koreans and everybody else. The U.S. diplomat, let's have a little listen to what he said about this offer from the North Koreans.
I think another element that we need to be very aware of is, I think part of the North Korean strategy is to try to decouple the Republic of Korea, the South Koreans, from the United States. And so I would not be surprised if this play isn't part of that strategy as well.
Sung-Yoon Lee, is that at the heart of it? Has Christopher Hill hit the nail on the head? North Korea wants to drive a wedge between the US and South Korea by playing nice for now.
They say all politics is local. Let's take a look at the basic internal dynamic in the Korean Peninsula. By all conventional indices of measuring state power, military power, political power, soft power, economic power, the size of the territory, population, except for military power, North Korea far lags behind the very successful, prosperous, pleasant other Korean state across the border. So the sheer existence of a thriving South Korean republic is a threat to the very existence of the North Korean dictatorship, so said Donald Trump to the South Korean National Assembly last November. So for Kim, yes, driving a wedge between the two allies, getting the US out of South Korea, to pull the troops out of South Korea, is a non-negotiable long-term strategic goal. And how do you achieve that? You become a credible, imminent nuclear threat to the US mainland, and that's where North Korea is, on the verge of nuclear breakout today. There are many constants in this story, in the latest North Korea revelation news. And what's different today is that North Korea has nukes, North Korea has ICBMs, and it also, for the first time, has a softer image in Kim Yo-jong, the sister, who exudes a softer image, puts a human face to the very unattractive state that is North Korea. And speaking of demonization, it's North Korea that has called America's first African-American president a wicked black monkey that should go back to its natural habitat in Africa and feed off the breadcrumbs thrown at it by tourists. It's North Korea that has called South Korea's former female president a dirty old prostitute, skirt-lifting, stinky Obama pelvis-licking dirty old whore. That's May 2015. What's the problem here? It's not demonization. It's patronization, our tendency to be dismissive of North Korea, to belittle North Korea implicitly, and think that if we throw them a bone, if we are a bit nicer, if we treat them more courteously, maybe they'll listen to us. If we give them money, they'll listen to us and give up their nukes. I don't think so. That kind of assumption would never be applied against the other nuclear weapon states. Does anyone really think that through conventional nuclear diplomacy, we can get India or China or Russia or Israel to disarm?
Okay, some fascinating points there. Han Park, I really appreciate how you always try to make a point of getting us to understand that North Korea is a country like other countries and it just wants to survive and it's filled with normal people. I myself visited, of course. The ordinary North Koreans are just, normal people trying to get by. Some great people in an impossible system. But don't the other two have a point here? That while we might accept that, we can take that a bit further, that perhaps they're even smarter in terms of leadership than we think, and might be even more Machiavellian than we think, and they might actually be trying to drive a wedge between the US and South Korea by this latest diplomacy.
We have to be very clear about what is the objective that we are pursuing. What do we want North Korea to be like? Do you want it like a smaller South Korea, democracy, capitalism? Do you want it to be militarily very strong nuclear power? Neither. In fact, the first option of North Korean becoming democracy and capitalized, it's impossible. The world consists of all kinds of variety of systems. So North Korea is not one of South Korea. And the Koreas, they will negotiate, they will compromise, they will try to reunite. That is, we cannot do anything about America and so forth. So we have to be thinking about the eventuation that Moon Jae-in used the security card against the United States. or improving relations with North Korea. So that is a very provocative idea, but that is very forthcoming reality.
Right.
So my point is, we have to be guided by our objective. What do you want North Korea to be?
Okay, let me then ask that to Sung-Yoon Lee, and that's a really good question. We've got about 2 minutes until I have to wrap up. Sung-Yoon Lee, what do we want North Korea to be?
We want North Korea to introduce gradual reform and opening and become a free, open society. Now, can that be achieved? Well, let's look at some precedents. Vietnam in the 80s introduced step-by-step gradual reform opening, as did China. In the case of those two communist nations, there was no existential threat. There was no pan-Vietnamese or pan-Chinese contest for legitimacy between the PRC and the ROC. In the case of Vietnam, Vietnam had been communized as of 1975. In the case of the Korean Peninsula, you have a problem, a dilemma for the Kim regime. If you change and open up your society, more of your own people will hop over the fence to the more successful, richer, freer Korean state. So there is sort of an existential dilemma for Kim Jong-un. That's why Kim maintains his ironclad grip, totalitarian control over the people, the likes of which the world has never seen. North Korea's crimes against humanity are without parallel in the contemporary world, as the UN report, 372 pages long, of February 2014.
Undoubtedly,
states.
yes. The gulags are horrendous, absolutely, yes. Yes. If you'd allow me to interrupt you.
So why
yes,
don't
okay.
we...
very finally, please, if you can make your point briefly, because I have one final question for Olivia as well. Very finally, sir.
No South Korean president has ever called on the Kim regime to tear down the walls of those horrific gulags. Moon Jae-in, formerly, is a human rights lawyer. Would it be too much to ask North Korea to dismantle at least one or two of those political prisoner concentration camps?
Yeah, good question. Olivia, final question for you. No matter where you stand on this, whether you feel Washington needs to move towards the North Koreans or not accept this, do you agree that the State Department needs to get its act together? We've seen the veteran North Korea negotiator Jo Yoon recently announce his retirement. There's no ambassador to Seoul in South Korea at the moment. I mean, come on, shouldn't they have double the people working on this rather than having all these vacancies everywhere?
We need strong U.S. leadership when it comes to addressing North Korea, because at the end of the day, we want to see a North Korea that is denuclearized. We want to see a North Korea that's rights respecting. As Sung-Yoon Lee said, we want to see a North Korea that has a free and open society. And I think apart from strong U.S. leadership, both at the State Department and the White House, and strong coordination with our ally, South Korea, that's the only way that we're going to have a strong policy that can move the needle on North Korea.
Okay, it's been a pleasure talking to all of you. Olivia Enos, Sung-Yoon Lee, and Han Park, I thank you all for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Still ahead on the Newsmakers, counting the votes in Sierra Leone out of a crowded field of presidential candidates who'll be elected to strengthen the country. And around 180 people are dead as South Africa grapples with the world's worst ever outbreak of Listeria. Sierra Leone is a country desperate to rebuild. It's faced a civil war fueled by blood diamonds and child soldiers, an Ebola outbreak, and economic ruin. A crowded field of 16 presidential candidates say they have the solution. And voters on Wednesday went to the polls to decide whether the country should continue the policies of outgoing President Ernest Bai Koroma or pick a fresh face. But is new blood possible when critics say the political landscape is dominated by only two parties? Shoaib Hassan reports.
These people are voting to decide who will try to lead Sierra Leone out of its current socio-economic crisis. And unlike the last election, it looks like they want change.
Well, the general sort of overview why I choose my candidate is predominantly for a better Sierra Leone, and that's more on a generic level. So we're looking for something or someone that's going to make a change, and that's going to make Sierra Leone great again.
Not so long ago, things were very different. In 2012, Ernest Bai Koroma was re-elected president after winning more than 58% of the vote. At that time, the economy was the fastest growing in sub-Saharan Africa, with investments in iron ore and diamond industries. But the crash of international commodity prices in 2014 brought that to a halt. Currently, the UN says 60% of the population is unemployed, and 6 million live on less than $1.25 a day. The economic collapse also affected social services, making them incapable of responding properly to the outbreak of Ebola in 2014. The virus killed 4,000 people before being finally brought under control, but epidemics continue to pose a threat in a country with only 200 doctors. Much of the criticism for this situation has been put at the door of the ruling APC party, accused of corruption and bad governance. Its main candidate is former Foreign Minister Samura Kamara, but he's facing stiff competition from Julius Maada Bio, a former military junta leader. Also in the running is a former UN Undersecretary, Kande Yumkela. It's been a close contest so far, but the bigger question is, can the winner put Sierra Leone back on its feet and stabilize the economy? Shoaib Hassan, the Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now to discuss this from the capital, Freetown, is the presidential spokesman, Abdoulaye Baratai, from the ruling party, the All People's Congress. We also have the spokesman of the opposition National Grand Coalition Party, which is Julius Spencer. Gentlemen, I thank you very much for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Abdoulaye Baratai, let me begin with you. Tell me why you think now is not the time for change and that Sierra Leone needs more of the ruling APC.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. The reason why we think that we should continue in governance, because over the years, since we came into governance in 2007, the development agenda we have rolled out in this country, as well as our human rights record. In fact, since 1961, it is only from 2007 to 2017-18, as I'm speaking to you, that we don't have any prisoner of conscience, that we have not arrested or executed anybody based on their political beliefs. And besides, the infrastructural development, the free healthcare initiative we introduced, and our robust fight against corruption. We came into governance at a time when corruption was the order of the day. We met an anti-corruption commission, but it was a toothless bulldog, because before you prosecute cases, you'll have to get the consent of the Minister of Justice and Attorney General. So when we came into governance, we said, well, wait a minute. If the minister sits in cabinet with his colleagues and there is someone found culpable of some financial impropriety, how would they, if they are friends, how are they going to be prosecuted?
Right.
So we removed that aspect so that the ACC can be very independent.
Okay, so let's go to Julius. Julius, we've had a list of things mentioned by Abdoulaye as to why now is the time for continuation. Even though the man will change, his preferred candidate, Dr. Samura, should be the next president and not your preferred candidate, Kande Yumkela. Tell me why you disagree.
Well, for many reasons. A lot of what my young friend has just said, on the surface, yes, he has a point. But when you go behind the surface, you find out that it is just a facade. If you talk about corruption, corruption is at its worst that this country has ever seen under this government. Everybody knows it. You cannot get anything done without bribing somebody. Now the Anti-Corruption Commission that he's talking about is focusing on what it calls low-level corruption and ignoring the high-level corruption, which is what is destroying this country. They're going after policemen that are receiving small bribes on the street. and not focusing on the government officials.
That's an interesting point. Let me grab onto that for a second, right? And let me pose something to Abdullah. Abdullah, it's not just Julius Spencer who's in the opposition, so you could say, well, the opposition has to say this. Listen to retired teacher Arthur Tailu. Have a listen.
The present government has got a lot of clout. I mean, they have got a lot of money. And in a very poor country like Sierra Leone, money talks. Even people who have been suffering terribly, you know, when you give them a lot of money, you can sway them. But there are people, of course, who cannot be swayed.
So, Abdullah, there's a suggestion that money talks in the country and that the ruling party wields money unfairly in a political sense. Is that true?
Well, I can challenge that. The reason being, it is even good it is coming from a teacher, because one of our targets is the fight against ghost workers. You can't believe from the payroll, it was business as usual. It was only when we came into governance, we were able to expunge about 6,000 ghost teachers from the payroll, which amounted to billions of leones. So for us, the perception there is corruption permits. And we agree that corruption is a challenge because it has the inextricable link to undermine development, particularly in a country like Sierra Leone that is at the periphery of global development. But we have done something spectacular. Imagine since 2004, when the Millennium Challenge Corporation was introduced by the United States government, Sierra Leone was only able to pass that in 2012, which today we are implementing a $44.4 million grant from the United States government because of our robust fight against corruption.
Okay.
So I can say, whatever they will say as an opposition, we will accommodate that because we are not thin-skinned. But what we'll concentrate on is nobody will deter us in our fight against corruption because we know how corruption can contribute to poverty, thereby undermining the very fabric upon which the mandate of this government was given by the people of Sierra Leone.
Okay, and I want to move on from corruption a little bit and sort of broaden it out and look at a medley of issues over the next 9 minutes or so. So, Julius, credit where it's due. Would you agree that in the face of immense crises, such as the Ebola epidemic, this government has done okay?
No, I certainly will not. In fact, the fact that the Ebola crisis was as bad as it was in Sierra Leone was a real result of the inefficiency and ineffectiveness of the government. If you look at Sierra Leone, had the worst scenario, and it affected our economy more than it affected the other countries that suffered from it. Why did that happen? It's because of the inefficiency of the government. Ebola should not have hit us as badly as it did if the government had done its work right. Everybody knows that. If you look at what happened with the funds that were received for Ebola, a lot of it was misappropriated. The Auditor General's report on that and many other issues that the Auditor General has been reporting on over the years have not been implemented. It's always clear for everybody to see. Everybody in this country knows that corruption is rife in this country. Right. You look at talking about development, many things are not happening the way they should.
Okay, so Abdullah, $14 million meant to help fight Ebola went missing. That's the Auditor General. It's not the opposition making it up. Could you have done better? Was corruption involved in that?
Well, this is again part of the skewing of the messaging around corruption by the opposition. To them, everything should be politicized. But I must say, for the sake of the records, when the Auditor General, we authorized the Auditor General when we suspected that the Ebola funds were being compromised. President Nkrumah authorized a real-time auditing, which was a novelty in this country. And the other thing we did was the state broadcaster, the television, the newspapers, the media, they were all invited in a public forum at the House of Parliament. And guess who were found culpable? Civil society were found culpable. And even with all respect to Dr. Julius Spencer, his name was also mentioned that some money is given in the name of the Sierra Leone Association of Journalists. His company was also found culpable. Whatever happened with that, nobody knows. But one thing I can authoritatively say was the civil society people that you have found wanting, they have paid the money. The supplier that was supposed to deliver the rest of the ambulances, he delivered, and the Anti-Corruption Commission came out with a report very clearly to vindicate, and not a single politician was found wanting. But you know, in our country, that is why it is unfortunate that Dr. Spencer was making a dichotomy between low and high corruption. I was fortunate to attend the 9th International Anti-Corruption Conference in Durban, South Africa. When it comes to the fight against corruption, you don't cherry pick. And this is where, for us as a government, we will continue to make sure whatever type of corruption is corruption across the board.
Okay, Julia Spencer, you're cherry-picking the facts, and you also got a name check a couple times in there as Abdullahi is looking at potential corrupt dealings. Your opportunity to respond, sir.
That what he said is absolutely false. My name was never mentioned in investigation in Parliament, and he knows that. I would not want to use the word that I am tempted to use in terms of what he has just said. Now, the Sierra Leone Association of Journalists had a project which I initiated, and there was a process which was agreed with the U.S. Embassy, and that is what was followed. The U.S. Embassy never complained. Some people who did not understand the process raised issue within the Sierra Leone Association of Journalists. There was no mention of that in Parliament, and he knows that. So he's just being mischievous by saying what he just said. Now, if you look at the
country,
he spoke about,
and they are using the effect that you compromise the process, sir. I respect you, but for the records, I have to bring this out so that you cannot be seen to, as this crusader to fight corruption when, in fact, name was also
point well
mentioned,
made.
sir.
Point well made. Julius Spencer, finish your point, Julius.
Now, he's talking about me cherry-picking low-grade corruption. I did not do that. I said that the anti-corruption says it is focusing on low-grade corruption and ignoring the high-level corruption. That is what is happening. It is not me saying that that is what should be done. It is what is happening. That's all I'm mentioning. Now, he's just being mischievous by making the comment he's making.
Okay. Abdullahi Baraitei, I want to move forward. Hold on for a second. I want to move forward for a second here. World Health Organization report saying that Sierra Leone is one of the most dangerous places in the world for people aged 15 to 29. The mortality rate is off the charts. It's absolutely outrageous. How are you going to create a society where not only, never mind young people thriving, you just want young people to stay alive? How are you going to have that happen?
Thank you very much. Well, we do recognize the challenges the young people face in this country. I always recall when I was a student leader and a practicing journalist in this country, we have always been articulating how the young people cannot be left behind, particularly when we read the Truth and Reconciliation Commission reports, whereby youth marginalization was an important factor in fueling the crisis in the 90s. So that is why when President Nkrumah came, he moved beyond just saying we have to empower the young people, but rather we were able to see how to support them, even in retraining, because some of the degrees we have from the university, the economy is not addressing that directly. So we said the Chinese government gave us about $30 million for a youth excellence village, so that even if you study your Greek and Roman history or your drama, you will be able to come and retrain. That way you can fit into the new economy. And this is where in our own agenda for prosperity, in Pillar 1, the diversification of the economy, the centerpiece of that is young people. And as I'm speaking to you, it is the first time in this country that young people have received opportunities. And with support from the UNDP, a lot of training has been going on so that they can fit into the new economy.
Okay, so Julia Spencer, as the National Grand Coalition and with your candidate, how are you going to try to ensure that young people stay alive and thrive and become fantastic, excellent citizens of Sierra Leone doing well and fulfilling themselves and their ambitions for their nation?
Well, in the first place, the first thing is for them to stay alive. Sierra Leone has one of the worst maternal and infant mortality rates. Again, for young people, Sierra Leone is rated as one of the worst places to live in. That is because many things are not in place. The healthcare system is in a terrible state. If you have any serious ailments, you have to go out of the country even for proper diagnosis. Yes, the government has instituted what is called a free healthcare program for lactating mothers, etc., but it is not working properly. And everybody knows that there are complaints all over the place. And when you look at all the problems we are having, corruption is at the heart of it. So first thing, reduce corruption significantly. It may not be possible to get rid of it totally, reduce it significantly. And now, in terms of programs for the young people, you have to have programs that will give them respectability. A lot of what is happening is that there are one or two programs here and there which they get jobs. And a lot of the jobs that are being provided are menial jobs, like clearing refuse. Agriculture is the mainstay of our economy, or should be the mainstay of our economy, but it is back-breaking work. Now, for these sectors to become attractive, and for young people to even get into professions that are more attractive, the government needs to pay attention to things like the creative industries, which have been neglected in Sierra Leone. They need to pay attention to IT, information technology, and encourage our young people to get into that. If you look at the education sector, the curricula of many of our tertiary institutions are in the 19th century.
Okay, and there's some massive challenges, massive challenges for your country. Gentlemen, you've both been excellent, and it's been really good to have you both on the same program. It's an important election for your country. We'll be watching and listening closely for results, and you know, we hope everything goes smoothly and peacefully until we have that announcement. But for the moment, Abdullahi Baraitai and Julia Spencer, I thank you both for joining us here on the Newsmakers.
Any processed products I won't buy anymore. I've bought renowned sausages. That's a good brand, supposedly to be. I bought it from Enterprise Thursday. And if this is it, sorry, I won't purchase any more products.
The world's largest outbreak of Listeria is happening right now in South Africa. Out of almost 1,000 cases of food poisoning since January last year, around 180 people have died. The government linked the outbreak to one of its largest meat manufacturers, Enterprise Foods, and a sausage known as polony to South Africans. The company denies it has anything to do with the deaths, but that hasn't stopped neighboring countries from banning the import of processed meats from South Africa. Well, let's talk to South Africa's Shadow Deputy Minister for Health, Lindy Wilson. She's from the Opposition Democratic Alliance and joins us from Cape Town. Lindy, good to have you on the program. The largest Listeria outbreak ever recorded globally. It's another award for South Africa, an award that South Africa doesn't want to have. How was this allowed to happen?
Well, indeed, you're quite correct. It's certainly not a record we'd like to be holding. However, there's a lot of issues that surround this. And I think what one needs to realize that the bacteria, Listeria monocytogenes, is everywhere. It's on farms, it's in feces, it's in agriculture, it's everywhere. And there's not a South African who does not come across or is in the path of Listeria, the bacteria itself, on a daily basis. What has happened here, however, is that a particular strain has got in or has been traced to this particular factory. And obviously, it's an industry where the turnover between process and consumption is very quick. Therefore, it's a very high-risk area. The fact remains, though, is while it's been sourced to this point, is that the original source? And I think this is the concern. We don't know that exactly.
Right. Have a little listen to Lawrence McDougall, the chief executive of Tiger Brands.
There is no direct link with the deaths to our products that we're aware of at this point. Nothing.
Okay, that's what he said there. And in a moment, I'll tell you what they told us very recently. But first of all, Lindy, your response to that, was that denialism from Tiger Brands?
Well, I don't know that it was a denialism. As I say, our concerns are was that actually the source? Because we have our perception is that the Department of Health has failed in this whole Listeria outbreak, how it has been handled and what led up to this. And one of our concerns is that the World Health Organization has said we are 3,000 health and environmental officers short. And the concern then has raised itself that had the inspections been done, had Department of Health been doing their job, or the municipalities been doing their job in the first time, that this possibly could have been prevented and picked up before it reached outbreak stage.
Right. And for those who'd say, well, of course, you're in the opposition, so you would criticize. The government's been doing all it can. Your response would be?
Well, my response is let's deal with the facts. And the facts are that we're 3,000 short health and safety inspectors. They are not equipped, they're not qualified, they don't have the resources, and not just to do factory inspections, but to do port inspections as well. So it's very easy to point fingers at the factory. Is that in actual fact the original source? Ourselves, Australia and other countries around the world import emulsifiers and what they call white slime. How do we know? Can the minister tell me concretely that this listeriosis did not come through the ports? It is amazing that other countries at the same time as us are all facing the same outbreak, and are they importing the same products as we are?
Yeah, lots of big questions. I mean, some people feel it's just one factory in Polokwane. Some say, we just don't know, as you say. Now, not long after Lawrence McDougall said what he said, we reached out to Tiger Brands and Enterprise, who own Enterprise. We wanted to have them on the program. They refused, but they gave us a statement. Here's a truncated bit of it. We can confirm that we have, with immediate effect, undertaken a full national recall of the affected Enterprise ready-to-eat meat product range. Additionally, we have suspended operations at both Enterprise manufacturing facilities and have halted supply to trade. The company is working closely with the authorities to conduct a recall. If you were in a position of power right now, would you concur with this? Is this the right way to go?
Oh, absolutely. I think it is. However, the problem goes further than that, in that everybody who's bought these products is now discarding them, dumping them, throwing them out in their rubbish. And that is the problem, because now we have run the risk. It's one thing to recall it, but what about the products that are out there? The person who's thrown the polony or the Vienna sausages into the bins, into the rubbish. And if this is contaminated, it's going to create an even bigger problem in the long run.
Yeah, good point. So Namibia, Mozambique, Malawi, Uganda, all saying no processed meat from South Africa. We don't want your polony and everything else. Zambia even going further and saying, hey, fruit and veg as well, we're not going to touch it, send it back. There's a lot of concern from the neighbors. Are they warranted and justified in their concern?
Yes, I think so to a degree. Obviously, listeriosis, if not checked very quickly, and as we know, has resulted in deaths. I think that is a concern. The strain has been found in that factory, but we are still not convinced that that was actually the original source. And if it was not the original source of the outbreak, then we have a problem, because this whole banning of imports by other countries obviously has a serious effect on our economy. It's going to create job losses that South Africa can't afford. And our concern is this actually the source? Is this actually the source?
Yeah, we look forward to finding out, and we hope that people stop getting sick and people stop dying of this extraordinary story here. Largest ever outbreak recorded globally of Listeria outbreak in South Africa. Lindy Wilson, for the moment, I'm going to have to thank you. Thank you very much for joining us here on the Newsmakers.
estas 5.2 toneladas tienen un valor en la calle, en las ciudades belgas, de aproximadamente 350 millones de euros.
That's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. You can check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Remember to like, follow and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.